You're listening to the Law Lives Project. I'm your host, Angie Vishianan. I'm a lawyer that launched a startup focused on changing the legal profession through mentorship. Through this podcast, we will explore the early career steps of real lawyers to help students see that many of us didn't have it all figured out at first. It takes time to find your way in the profession, so we want to shed light on some of the challenges people face in the earliest part of building their careers. Each week, I sit down with members of the legal profession and chat with them about the paths they took to get where they are now, including the times they stumbled, the times they fell, and the times they needed a little help. To encourage candor and vulnerability on this show, the attorney guests will remain nameless, but their stories will be laid bare for your consideration. This episode is sponsored by the Princeton Review. For more than 35 years, students and their families have trusted the Princeton Review to help them get into their dream schools. Their mission is to provide personalized, innovative, best-in-class private tutoring, test prep, and admission products and services to help students knock down barriers and achieve their academic goals. They are solely on the side of the students. They are not affiliated with any of the test developers. When it comes to your future, they'll cover you every step of the way. With score guarantee courses, private one-on-one tutoring, webinars, and support articles, you'll never lack the tools you need. Check them out at www.review.com or call 800-2-REVIEW. That's 800-273-8439. And save 20% on your course enrollment with promo code TPRLLP. Today's guest started off with humble beginnings and eventually earned her way into working in a highly competitive commercial litigation boutique. Although she developed an interest in law school during college, she had very limited financial resources and had difficulty applying to law school. She discusses her experiences in attending a low-ranked law school and her difficulties in obtaining her first job. But with hard work, she eventually found a passion in litigation and found her way into working in a very competitive commercial litigation boutique, and finally achieving the financial stability she wanted. Keep listening to hear her frank words about how to find your first legal job and what you should do to survive law school when the odds are stacked against you. Thank you so much for joining us today. We're going to start off with your law school journey, and then we'll talk a little bit about your first legal position, and then we'll get into how your career path has evolved since you started. So can you tell me a little bit about what are the reasons that you decided to go to law school in the first place?
Sure. So I think I always knew I wanted to be a lawyer. I think I was that kid that always asked why to authority figures and heard so many times, you should be a lawyer. And I realized that I wanted to be a lawyer when I was an undergrad. At the time, I was a business major because my parents told me to be, but I joined, the Student Government Association with the university, formed a student lobbying group, and then I actually took a break from school and worked for the Texas legislature. And I really fell in love with advocacy. I love the idea of researching, putting together bills, going through the process, testifying in committees on either side. When I returned back to undergrad after that experience, I used that student lobbying branch of student government to come up with bills that the university students wanted us to testify in front of the Texas legislature over. So we did. We had the great fun of testifying in front of the Texas Higher Education Committee on certain issues. And I remember walking up to the podium, sitting down with my, padfolio, my bullet points, explaining why I thought they should vote yes or no on a bill, getting questioned. And I remember getting up, walking back into the gallery and thinking, this is what I want to do for a living. So that pretty much steered me towards litigation from day one.
That's awesome. So did you already know you were going to apply to law school straight out of undergrad, or did you take any gap years?
I planned on doing Teach for America for a couple of years and really made the decision to go straight into law school probably the week of my undergrad graduation, which was when I had to give Teach for America an answer. I had no background in teaching. I was a political science major and legal studies minor, but I loved the Teach for America recruiting message that came to my undergrad. So yeah, I was planning on teaching for 2 years in an underprivileged area and then going to law school. It was when I started getting either waitlist or acceptances and realized, maybe it's now or never, that I decided to go straight in.
And how did you decide which law schools to even apply to?
Very rarely does someone have their pick of, all the law schools they want. So I think I was limited majorly because of my LSAT score. I knew I wanted to be in Texas or DC. So I applied to most of the Texas schools and some DC law schools. But I had really bad testing anxiety, and I worked two jobs in undergrad. I didn't have a lot of money for an expensive LSAT prep course. So I didn't do super well on the LSAT. I think my score that I submitted was a 149, which you kind of keep it to yourself because it's such a low score. That was the best I could do with the time that I had with the resources that I had. I got waitlisted at universities like American University in DC, and a couple here in Texas, and just decided when Texas A&M told me to come on down with my acceptance letter, I jumped at that opportunity.
And do you remember how many law schools you ended up applying to total?
I'd say about 12. Really, all the Texas schools except for UT Austin. Not because I wouldn't have loved to go there. I just knew, first of all, law school applications are expensive. So with every law school application, I was working shifts as a waitress to fund those applications. So I think all of the schools except for UT Austin, and then 2 to 3 in DC.
Yeah, I think you're totally right that the law school application process is more expensive than people realize. You're paying for LSAT prep, you're paying for CAS reports, you're paying for application fees. And luckily, there's so many programs that I didn't even know of back then to help you pay for all of that stuff. When I was applying to law school, I didn't apply for the LSAC fee waivers. I didn't realize you could get waivers for application fees if you just even wrote to law schools and just asked. A lot of law schools will just give you one now, and I didn't know that. So you ended up going to Texas A&M. What were a few things that you wish you knew before going into law school?
Honestly, I feel like I was pretty well prepared for the subject matter. A lot of people, when I've sat on panels and the question is asked, everyone that I serve with usually says, I wish I would have known what the classes were like or the subject matter, how rigorous it would be. I think I was pretty well prepared. I did, at my undergrad, they had a pre-law preparatory academy. I went to the University of Texas at San Antonio, and their summer pre-law program. I didn't know it at the time, but I realized it midway through law school that it really did prepare us so well. It was mainly a summer program. You could do it for both summer semesters or, one semester each year. And we had a couple lawyers teach torts, a couple lawyers teach legal writing. I think there was a civil procedure and con law class. And what's funny is when I bought my books in law school, a lot of them were very similar to the books I had to buy in undergrad for that summer law school preparatory academy. So I think I went in knowing pretty well the subject matter and feeling very prepared. So I have to give a shout out to those summer programs that undergrads do. I think I wasn't ready for the mental challenge that comes with law school. Most people that attend law school, they've probably been roughly, more or less the smartest people in their undergrad classes already, or they at least thought they were the smartest people and continued those thoughts in law school. So you're in a bubble with people that have been the best of the best where they came from, and now you're all in one place together. So I think just going through the psychological effects of that, I wish I would have prepared a little bit better. But also knowing that, not everyone's in the law library, cutting pages out of books like you see in some law school movies. There are people that genuinely are where they're right where you are, and making friendships is part of the experience.
Do you think that your law school was more competitive than others, or did you notice anybody being unhealthily competitive?
I don't know if my law school is more competitive than other law schools that maybe like, the top 15 law schools where everyone is really type A and competitive, but there were people that were very nervous and they were trying to read every supplement and every book possible to try to anticipate the questions on the final exams. And then there were actually people that I remember that tried to like tell you if you missed a class, like wrong information to see, it's kind of like, you're hoping they trip when they walk on stage, that kind of thing. There wasn't a lot of that. You don't realize it at the time, but law school and the legal profession, even in a big city like where I'm at, is a small community. Everyone remembers each other. So many folks that I went to law school with that I barely knew, I actually come into contact with now. And so everyone kind of remembers who everybody was from law school. And I would say to those that are about to go to law school or in it now, look around the classroom where you're at, because those are future potential clients, opposing counsel, judges, arbitrators, mediators. And you'll be surprised how many people you don't think you'll see after graduation that you will see in practice.
Yeah, I mean, your reputation building starts the moment you enter law school. People will remember if you are petty.
Right.
You
Oh,
don't
people
want
will.
to be the person that like sabotage people in law school. That's not gonna. It's not a good look for anyone. So,
Right.
um,
Right.
yeah. So, can you tell me? Did you participate in any extracurricular activities while you were in law school, like moot court or law review or clinics or externships?
I did a law review. I was right outside the top 10% after my 1 all year, so I qualified to write on. A lot of people don't realize, and I think most law schools are structured like this. There's a certain percentage, if you're in the top whatever percent of your class, usually it's 10% or so, you automatically get an offer to the law review or certain journals. But if you are right outside of that, still close to the top of the class, you have the opportunity to write on. And with my law school, the write on process was you were given a topic to write on, like a mock law review note or comment. And then there was a second part where you had to read an article and really just proofread it. And so based on that, the folks with the highest scores for their writing sample and their grammatical review, I think it was maybe just a handful out of my group that applied through the write on process for extended an offer. So I wrote on and really glad that I did law review. Because I was on law review, opportunities opened up for me that I don't think opened up for other law students. Like there were some firms that when they recruited, they only wanted to interview law review students. And I couldn't really understand that other than, they just wanted folks with good grades, which I got. Then I thought, well, then why don't you just open up your criteria to those in the top whatever percent? It really wasn't until after law school that I realized why firms valued law review or law journal experience when I started writing briefs and memos and all the other things that lawyers write on a daily basis. I was much more conscientious of how I was writing, how I was proofing my work, my bosses, my colleagues' work. I'm aware of so many blue book and red book rules, and those are books that lawyers use for various legal writing tools. I have some of those rules still memorized to this day. Every now and then they come into handy, but I now get it. So, in addition to law review, which was a great experience, I was also involved as my law school's liaison to one of the local bar associations. And if I had to pick one thing that I did right in law school, it was doing that because being a liaison to a local bar association on behalf of your school, it exposed me to so many different networking and career building opportunities that I never would have gotten.
Yeah. So, can you tell me a little bit about that? I mean, a lot of law students don't realize that alongside the academics of law school, you should also be networking with practitioners and really starting to build your professional network. So, can you tell me what are some of the things that you did while you were in law school to talk to other lawyers in the practice areas that you were interested in and do some career exploration?
Sure. Well, it was that. It's being the student liaison some years ago to the Dallas Association of Young Lawyers on behalf of my law school. So the Dallas Association of Young Lawyers, or I call it DAYL, they pick students from different area law schools within the DFW area to serve on their board of directors as a law student liaison. So I did that my entire 3L year, a little into my 2L year and all my 3L year. And it put me in a room with lawyers on an almost weekly basis from Dallas. I was there for the purpose of representing my law school and the board of directors, but it exposed me to so many different areas of law practice through the people that I met that I never would have met had I just been, a law student hanging out in the law library that afternoon instead of going to this professional networking happy hour that I had to go to because I was the liaison. So it got to the point where I met so many lawyers who are now friends, coworkers now, that when I got ready to graduate from law school, even though I had done OCIs and I participated in one of the programs that I got through OCIs, I didn't have a job lined up, which is kind of what everyone's always concerned about, right? You want a job after you graduate. And so, because of the meaningful connections I made as the student liaison to the DAYL, I had dozens of lawyers that I was on the first name basis with because I served on some committee with them, whether it was passing out T-shirts at the Walk to End Alzheimer's or helping with sign-up sheets at some charitable event that DAYL partners with. I was on first name basis with these people. I thought that they generally liked me, I liked them, and I started just emailing them towards the end of my 3L year saying, hey, here's my resume. I'm not asking you for a job, but I'm just asking that you keep me in mind because I would love to stay in this area after law school and find a job. And that's ultimately what led to my first job, not through the dozens and dozens of cold calls and emails I sent out to firms, which I also did, but it was through the networking that I did with the DOIL that I landed my first job.
That's so valuable. Can you tell me what jobs or internships or activities that you did between 1L and 2L year?
Yeah, so between my 1L and 2L year, I interned for a judge in Dallas County for the first 5 weeks of the summer. And then after that, I did a 10-week internship with a nonprofit organization called MALDEF. It's the Mexican American Legal Defense and Education Fund. So I was there for 10 weeks doing public interest law and advocacy.
Do you remember if you got that job through your law school or did you just see the job posting somewhere? How did you apply to it?
Through the law school that I went to. Yeah, they posted on some bulletin board for career services that they were looking for interns, and I applied.
And then what about the summer between your 2L and 3L year?
Summer between 2L and 3L year, I did something similar. I split my summers up into halves. So the first half, I clerked for the Texas Attorney General's office in Austin in their general litigation division, mainly doing employment defense. If you work for the state of Texas and you sue them, in an employment action, it's the Texas Attorney General. So got a lot of great experience there. I think I was there for about 6 weeks. And then the second half, I interned for a different judge in Dallas County.
Awesome. What were your experiences working for judges like? I think a lot of students are curious, like, what do you do when you work for a judge?
Yeah, it's great. So my 1L year, I mean, my first day interning for a judge was, I think, like the day after finals, in the spring, and it was terrifying and exhilarating at the same time. It was the first time I was really in a courtroom, which, hopefully the first time you're in a courtroom isn't when you're an actual lawyer. I wanted to make sure that I was even comfortable in the courtroom, but it was intimidating walking in. I was one of 6 other interns in my group. I was definitely the only one from my law school, and just intimidating walking in. You see the bench, you see this judge, this person in black robes. But it was phenomenal. I had just finished taking civil procedure my 1L year. So you would think I would know a little bit about civil procedure. And
Watching it play out, though, right?
yeah, but you're able to, I thought I knew what personal jurisdiction was. And I realized towards the end of the year, I didn't. And then within my first week, I watched what's called a special appearance hearing, and I got it. After just like a 30-minute hearing of listening to these lawyers argue back and forth, it clicked. So it was great watching what I was learning in real life. So I think if you are even remotely interested in litigation, I can't recommend interning for a judge enough because it'll probably tell you very quickly whether or not it's for you. I loved it. The judge would tell us what was on. I worked for male judges both times. He would tell us what was on the docket throughout the week, told us to feel free to read the briefs, do some research if we wanted to. And if we had questions or we had our thoughts on how he should rule, both judges were open to hearing them, which I loved. It was a unique opportunity to get, knowledge of what a judge was thinking on a case. I mean, the only other time I know that is when a judge rules on one of my cases after it's too late, right?
Which is terrifying, right?
Not terrifying, but it's great to know how judges think.
Yeah, I mean, I actually would highly recommend interning for a judge, even if you're not even sure what litigation is or whether it's for you. I thought I went into law school knowing I wanted to be a transactional lawyer. And thank goodness I had a mentor who just stressed to me the importance of just interning for at least one judge so I could see what that was like. And I remember, it being one of the most rewarding experiences in my law school career. So I'm so glad I did it, even though I wanted to do transactional law. It was just really, like you said, it's a totally different thing to be able to sit in the mind of the objective adjudicator. Like, I think for, advocates, it's one thing to advocate on behalf of a client. It's another thing entirely to be able to watch the whole thing play out from the standpoint of the judge and see, really good advocates and really bad advocates and be able to say like, okay, this is what it actually plays out like in the real world. So can you talk to me about any challenges or setbacks that you had to overcome in law school?
The biggest challenge for me was finding a job and how my choice of law school played into that. If I could go back, I would still have gone, I never would have changed law schools, but there was a time where I thought I should, and I almost did a couple of times at different stages in my law school, years. So, going to a tier 3 or tier 4 law school has its challenges. I spent countless times going to lunches, coffees, breakfast with lawyers and judges throughout my time in school, just trying to get advice and insight as to what they do and how to get a job. And you want to do that, being as respectful and polite as possible because these lawyers are giving you their time. But you're also hoping that they give you some hope, some sort of
Right?
yeah, encouragement while also still being candid. But for me, I don't know how many times I left those encounters feeling so discouraged because of where I went to law school. At the time, A&M wasn't even ranked when I was probably midway through law school. I think as I graduated, they were ranked. But I had so many lawyers and actual judges tell me that they think I should have either not gone to law school at all or should restart a top 50 or better school. I even had some lawyers tell me that frankly, they and their firm would never touch me because of where I went to law school. And that's discouraging. I mean, hey, it's reality, right? The best law schools, typically turn out, they think best law schools, best lawyers. But, everybody's got a different backstory. I mean, for me, I was limited by my LSAT score, which was also limited by my time. At the time when I was applying to law school, I was working 2 jobs. I had a lot of testing anxiety and I didn't have any lawyers in my family. I didn't know any lawyers. And so I just kind of did the best I could. And so for me, I was really proud that, hey, I'm on law review. I'm at the top of my class. I can hang with the best of them if you just give me a chance. And I was constantly, for every, 3 or 4 of these lunches or coffees or, even a telephone calls I was getting, I just had a lot of people say, sorry, we just don't hire from your law school. Best of luck to you. But as I was reflecting on this, I'm glad I went to where I graduated from. First, it's come such a long way. It's ranked competitively. It taught me to hustle a lot more than had I gone to a school that had more opportunities for its students at that time. I constantly see people from my law school getting better and better opportunities, and I'm so proud of where it's come and the students that I see coming out. My firm is, actually looking at hiring the next person from my law school. I was the first one. So that's great. But I think reflecting on it, I wouldn't change a thing because it taught me how to hustle and create and take opportunities in unique ways that hasn't stopped now that I've had my first or second job. It's translated into now business and career opportunity hustle for me. It instilled something that I wouldn't have had I transferred to one of the schools that I was planning to transfer to midway through.
Yeah, and I think, like you said, getting involved in DAYL, it got you to get out there and start meeting a lot of lawyers that were in the geographic area that you were going to be practicing in. So you just got to like meet a lot of the leaders in the area. And that you might not have been as encouraged to do that if you had gone to a law school that
Oh,
had
sure.
all of those opportunities. And and I think it's so interesting because I've talked to a bunch of people who go to like T14 law schools, and yeah, they end up getting big law jobs like straight out of law school. But then maybe they get a big law job in a practice area they don't actually want to be in, and then they have to switch. But now they've never had to hustle before, and now it's really hard for them to figure out, how do I transition out of this job that I hate? How do I switch? It's not always as easy as you think. And for people who come from lower tiered law schools, I think you have to hustle your entire time while you're in law school. So sometimes it's kind of a tortoise and the hare thing. Like, maybe you don't get the ideal job right out of law school, but since you have all of that hustle, since you have all of those skills, that networking, that gumption, that resilience, like, once you hit the lateral sweet spot around 3, 4, 5 years, like,
Oh,
all of
yeah.
a sudden I see them catapulting over their peers to get jobs, to get business development opportunities, to get all sorts of things that other people who have, for lack of a better phrase, had it easy, don't do, right? So I think that's a really, really valuable lesson. This episode is sponsored by the authors of #Networked, a new book written by me and 19 amazing women lawyers who I met on LinkedIn. During the early days of the COVID-19 pandemic, many of us were facing uncertainty in our lives and businesses. We went searching for support and community. We took to social media, and lo and behold, we found our soul sisters on LinkedIn. Who would have thought? I used to think LinkedIn was a glorified resume platform, but it's become so much more. Our group of lady lawyers grew to over 50 women. We laughed together, cried together, shared in losses and successes, and cheered each other on while we juggled practicing law, parenting, relationships, launching new companies, building online courses, side hustles, main hustles, podcasts, and more. 20 of us got together and self-published a book to share our stories about the early days of the pandemic, and we hope that it'll show others that you can find community even in the darkest of times. If you're searching for support or inspiration, please check out our book and read our stories. It's now available on Amazon in both Kindle and paperback editions. Just go to tinyurl.com/networkedbook. That's networked with an ED on the end. Thank you to all of my co-authors for dreaming up this beautiful project and bringing it to life through sheer force of will and determination. And now, back to the episode. So, how did you actually apply for your first post-law school position, and when did you get it?
I think my application was an ongoing, unofficial, informal thing. I probably sent a cover letter, resume, transcript, writing sample to probably more than 50 firms in the DFW and, Central Texas area. I knew I wanted to stay in Texas. I was, kind of between staying up here or moving back to my hometown. And I think I maybe got one call back that asked if I wanted to be an unpaid intern while I was waiting on bar results, which, at some point, the money that you save up for law school only goes so far. You need to start getting paid. So I think I respectfully turned that down. But like I had mentioned before, towards graduation, my 3L year, I had been the student liaison at DAYL for about a year then. And I had made meaningful relationships with lawyers, mainly, young lawyers between, the years kind of out of law school between 2 and 8 years of law practice. Some with the DBA, the senior kind of more seasoned lawyer bar, but mainly young lawyers. I can admit it now because I think I've admitted it on enough panels. I created a spreadsheet of people that I met, where they worked, what they did, and what I remembered, like why I liked them or why I think they liked me. And I sent, it started out as a form email, but each one of them were edited to be unique and tailored to the person I was sending it to. And I sent those emails with my resume and I think maybe my transcript or writing sample, I can't remember, to probably more than 40 lawyers between midway through my last semester and graduation, saying, in the most respectful way possible, that I really enjoyed getting to know them over my time in Dallas and that I wanted to stay in Dallas. And to the extent they heard of new opportunities, please think of me. Because I think you've got to walk the line between being diligent and persistent versus kind of annoying and pestering, right?
And
Because
entitled. I think that's the two, that I see it. Yeah, it is a fine line between being like diligent and following up with people and being respectful versus like being aggressive or entitled or,
maybe a little unprofessional. And yeah, it's an art, and not everybody gets it. And I like to think I kind of got it at the time. So after sending those emails, I graduated. I got most of the people I sent emails to responded because they weren't cold emails, so that they would think of me. So then I started bar prep, late May, June. Had a few of them email me that they might have heard of opportunities, but no one was really going to start aggressively looking at someone like me until I was done with the bar. At some point, one of the board members that I served on the board of directors with for the DAYL, he reached out to me and said that he thought his firm might be hiring. And he worked at a boutique. It was about, I think, 6 or 7 lawyers, business litigation firm in Frisco, Texas. I had to figure out where was Frisco, Texas, and it's right outside of Dallas. And not being from Dallas, I just didn't know. He said that they might be looking, take the bar, and check back in after I finished up the bar. So I followed up right after the bar exam, and sent some follow up emails to other leads. When I came back from my bar trip, I took a week and just kind of went to the beach and decompressed for a while. I came back to seeing an email saying, "Hey, my firm probably wants to interview you. Why don't you call this partner?" And I called that partner, and that led to a first interview, I think late August, and then a second interview towards the end of August. And I started at that firm on September 1. So everything happened pretty quickly. I had a couple of other offers, and it feels counterintuitive to say maybe don't take the first offer that you get because you want a job, but you have to be smart and you got to know yourself and know what you want. So I got an offer to work at a small personal injury firm about a week before I got the offer that I accepted. It's scary to turn down the job with a paycheck, but you've got to, again, know what you want to do.
Did you know which practice area you wanted to be in?
I really liked business litigation, which is what I did at that firm my first year out. In law school, we actually had the opportunity, because I went to a school in Texas. They taught some classes that were geared towards Texas law. So I took a few of those 3 all year. And one of them was kind of geared towards non-compete litigation, temporary restraining orders, injunctions. And I thought that was really interesting. And actually, one of my legal research and writing memos or my briefs were on Texas non-compete law. I found that fascinating. So this firm did a lot of that. And I am so grateful to the people that gave me my first chance, because now, being several years out of law school, I realize how when you take on a brand new lawyer, that lawyer is probably not going to be very profitable at first, and they're just not going to know anything. God help them. And I was one of them. And so anyone that hires a brand new law grad, I just have so much respect for, because it really is a service first, and then a job opportunity to teach a young lawyer everything they need to know.
Yeah, you're taking a chance. Baby lawyers, they have to learn how to walk, they have to learn how to run, they'll stumble and fall along the way, and you've gotta train them up. And
Right.
people don't realize how expensive it is to train them up either.
Exactly, exactly. As my firm is interviewing 3Ls for, permanent placement in the fall, I'm trying to think, okay, what projects can I even give this person once they start working, and trying to remember, okay, what did I know how to do my first week? And the answer was not a lot. So yeah, so that's how I got my first job: pure networking, pure persistence, emails, and letting my people think, okay, no one that you worked with in the bar knew what your writing quality was like, how your work product would be. No one knew what kind of lawyer you were going to be. So how can you say get involved in the bar helps? And It does, because the way you respond to emails, the way you take on projects for the bar, the way you handle communications and sometimes conflict within, I know the bar association sometimes has conflict. The way you handle all those things, people do watch and listen. I think that does translate into what kind of lawyer or employee that person might be. So if you do get involved in the bar as a law student, make sure you see the projects that you volunteer on through. Don't let those things fall apart or slip through your fingers because it's not technically a class or a final you have to take. It really does mean a lot.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I want to, kind of zone in on the fact that, like, for people who graduate from tier three and tier four law schools, I mean, mine is technically a tier three law school overall, but it's a very strongly ranked IP law school. But even still, for people who graduate from tier three and tier four law schools, like, you might be afraid if you're a 3L and you don't have a job upon graduation. And I totally get that feeling because I accepted my job like 2 days before graduation. I mean, I had to hustle as well. And, but I want to tell those people, like, take heart. You might not get your job until after you, sit for the bar. And that's okay. Like, you will land somewhere. You will be okay. But I think that, people have this idea, like, if they don't walk out of their second summer with a job at the firm that they worked at, all is lost. And it's really not. It's not at all. But that just means you just got to get out there and network even more, So, can you tell me a little bit about what type of work did you do at that first firm?
Yeah, so I did a lot of business litigation. I represented small businesses and sometimes individual plaintiffs, just involving employment or business litigation, but mainly within that non compete and unfair trade practices law. So and we did that both on the individual employee and on the employer side. So, on the employer side, we tried to enforce covenants not to compete in a former or even current employee's contract. For example, I represented a company where an employee left, and the day that he put in his notice, forwarded customer list to his Gmail account, and with
Never a good idea.
yeah, yeah. And pricing information and what we call proprietary information. And then, he cleared his desk and left and went directly to a competitor down the street and started, selling our clients confidential, hard, worked trade secrets to that competitor. So our job as lawyers were to file what we call an application for a temporary restraining order. It happens pretty quickly. You go down to the courthouse, you get what we call a temporary restraining order or a TRO. You serve the other side with it. The employee, sometimes we sued the employee's new company as well, like if they were in cahoots. And then we had what we call a temporary injunction hearing, which is almost like a mini trial regarding whether or not that order restraining them from doing that sort of conduct, should that be sustained throughout the length of the case. A lot of times I liked it because it was like a mini trial, and based on how the court would land, you could pretty much see where the sun was shining and the case would settle. Sometimes right after that or a little later. And then sometimes companies would get them to sign these non-competes that could not be held up in court, completely inequitable. And so we would represent the employee attacking or trying to set aside the non-compete. It was really interesting, fulfilling work. Also did a little bit of employment, litigation as well.
And if you don't mind disclosing, what kind of salary range would you say people could expect coming out of law school working at a firm like that? You said it was kind of a small boutique firm,
It
right?
was. Yeah, it was a small 6, 7 lawyer firm in Frisco, Texas. I think my offer letter said that I was gonna make somewhere between 60 and 70,000 with opportunity to bonus if I billed over a certain number of hours. But being at a smaller firm, I don't think I ever got close to those hours that you would bonus for, because I mean, it was just a different pace than medium size and firms that I would soon experience later on.
So, how long did you stay at that firm?
About a year and a month or two. So you mentioned before that at some point you're going to hit a spot where you're up for lateral opportunities to other firms, and you'll get recruiter emails and LinkedIn messages from recruiters all the time. You're always thinking when you get these, man, where were these when I was a law student? I would have loved all this. Truthfully, firms and recruiters realize you are extremely, professionally attractive once you've been trained up for about a year or two. And, you now know how to do things that a young, brand new out of law school grad doesn't know. And so when I was about a year into the firm that I was at first, I got a recruiter emailed me on LinkedIn about some job opportunity. And I really loved where I worked at that Frisco firm. I loved the people I worked with. It was very casual, laid back, friendly. No one ever yelled at you. Um, so I really wasn't looking to leave. And, I was convinced if I wanted to go and get a six-figure job, I would never leave my desk. And, I wanted to more in life. And so I kind of ignored that recruiter's calls for a little bit or politely declined. I don't think I ignored her. Eventually, her boss called me and said, "Hey, I think you'd be perfect for this firm downtown. It's a boutique firm that branched from a big firm. It's got a big firm feel, but it really is, it's about 20 lawyers and it's the best of both worlds." I agreed to have coffee with her one day, and coffee turned into lunch with a couple partners from that other firm. And it's hard. You feel like I felt like I was cheating on my first firm because I really enjoyed working there so much. But I realized that I think
Also you, right?
yeah, and I eventually realized my personal and professional aspirations, I think, were beyond a small firm environment. And I wanted to kind of take my experience to the next level, if that made sense. So they gave me an offer that over doubled my salary.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. And so I just thought if there's ever a time I'm going to work really hard, it's now, not 10 years from now when I hopefully have a family. So sure, I'll give it a shot at a downtown firm. And that's when I moved to my current firm some 4.5 years ago.
And then do you do the same kind of work at your current firm or is it broader?
It's broader. So I still do some restrictive covenant, non compete litigation, not as much. So I do mainly commercial and insurance litigation, a little bit of employment and business litigation as well. But instead of my clients being small businesses and individuals, I represent a lot of corporate, I basically say I represent corporate America and, Fortune 500, 100 companies are my clients. So my client contacts are mainly in-house counsel lawyers at other companies.
Do you think that you like the work that you do now better? Did you like the practice area that you had at your first firm?
I think I'm perfect where I'm at now for a few reasons. I feel like working for companies is really interesting to me because when you're working with a company and you're representing that company, you're kind of helping that company solve a large problem, especially when it comes across my desk in litigation. Problems already occurred, allegedly. I like the idea of helping this company problem solve. And keep in mind when a case comes to you as an associate or anyone really at an outside counsel firm, that means that that company's HR or business department couldn't solve the problem and their in-house counsel either couldn't solve it or wanted to refer it out so that if it was overly complicated or there's a lot of dollars at risk or they just didn't know enough about it. So when something hits my desk or my virtual desk these days, it's something that I realized there was no easy answer. And I find that challenge intriguing. Because I work for companies, the resources that are available to me are a little bit more plentiful. I'm able to see a case kind of further into the litigation process than when you're representing an individual. And it's unfortunate that the costs of litigation and just legal services are so expensive these days. And I don't know if I should even say these days, I think they've always been expensive. But, when you're representing an individual or a small business and they're in litigation, maybe they can't sustain an expensive lawsuit, even if they should win, or even if they should get so many dollars at settlement. And so a lot of times being a lawyer, you have to, even though the law might be clear that your client wins or loses, there are other factors driving the case, whether what business factors are weighing in on the company you represent or that individual. If that company's publicly traded, what's going on in the market for them, or if there's some sort of internal issue that the company is dealing with those are all things that weigh into what you do in a lawsuit that have nothing to do with the actual black letter law. And as a law student, you're kind of taught, okay, what's the black letter law? I research on Westlaw or Lexis, the answer is this or this. But that doesn't always mean that that's how that case is going to turn out.
Absolutely. Sometimes I think the practical realities of, like, what's your client's budget? How long can they wait for this result to happen? Really overcomes all other considerations. So, so a lot of times, those types of practical considerations drive these cases. I think it's so right that when you're in law school and you're reading these cases out of case books, you don't really get a sense of that. You just think like, okay, facts are on our side, or the law's on our side, like we will win. And
Right.
that is not how it plays out most of the time.
Exactly. And as a young lawyer, when I was representing small businesses and individuals, a lot of times they would run out of money before the deposition stage or the pretrial hearing stage. So a lot of times, we'd have to settle or come up with alternative results to help that client. But when you're working for a company, most of the times they have a little bit more, in their legal budget to see it through the deposition stage. So at my first firm, I didn't really get a lot of exposure to things beyond the initial case, some written discovery, and I wanted to,
Go all the way, right?
all the way, right? So, I really do enjoy working for companies because if a case is worth going all the way, they will pay for us to go all the way. We have some of our clients, even if a case is expensive, if they believe that they didn't do anything wrong on X or Y contract or another or whatever the deal is, the lawsuit's about, it's all about the principle for them. They'll pay to have their position noted rather than just try to settle it and take the more cost efficient route at first. And there's good and bad parts of that, but you do, when you represent companies, have a little bit more at your disposal than an individual or a small business might.
Absolutely. So how big is your firm now? How many lawyers?
I think we've got about 15. We, like a lot of firms, kind of froze hiring during 2020. I think in 2020 we wanted to hire probably one or two lawyers, and we kind of weren't sure what state of the world was going to be in at the end of the year.
Like
So
everyone else.
fortunately, I was on a committee in the Dallas Association of Young Lawyers at the beginning of COVID, where everyone was kind of scared in the legal industry. At least the associates were, because you heard of big law slashing salaries or doing reductions in force or rescinding offers to 3Ls, downsizing. So people were kind of scared. And so I was on this committee kind of keeping track of what firms in town were doing what and what firms were actually hiring. And fortunately, my firm, there was no reduction in force. No one got, a cut in pay. No one, there were no adverse employment decisions due to how our clients were reacting to COVID. And honestly, we got even busier because litigation really boomed,
Yeah.
especially in the insurance industry. I was very fortunate. My firm has weathered the storm quite well, and hopefully there's light at the end of the tunnel for 2021 with COVID. Uh,
Yeah.
I think we are planning to expand and grow a little bit faster this year. I think we'll be back at 20.
And do you have any idea what the salary range might be for somebody who's coming out of law school that joins a firm like that, that's like a mid-sized boutique?
Yeah, so in Texas, because I realize sometimes I look at New York or California lawyer salaries just to compare, but the cost of living is
Way higher, yeah.
yeah. In Texas, I think a boutique firm would probably offer a brand new law grad between maybe 115, 115 grand. It would be, I think, a six figure salary, anywhere between, I think, 115 and maybe 160.
In this practice area, like
In
general
this
commercial
in
litigation.
this practice area, yes, in my practice area, in Texas, especially in Dallas.
Yeah.
Sometimes I look and compare what San Antonio and Austin firms pay just for comparison. It's usually a little lower than Dallas and Houston.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, I found the Austin market definitely is much lower than Dallas sometimes in certain practice areas like an IP.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and students should keep that in mind when they're trying to decide where they want to practice. Look how saturated the legal market is in the city and what
Mhm.
salaries are.
What are some of the best things about your job? What do you like about it?
Well, now that I've been there several years and I'm not a brand new lawyer, I love how flexible my firm has made my position. I mean, I'm able to manage my cases with, I'm supervised by a partner on all my cases, but I feel like my firm's at this point, and I think a lot of people of my vintage in their kind of fifth, sixth year of practice, we've gotten to the point where we know how to manage a case. We still need guidance when it maybe comes to experts, trial prep, all that stuff. But
You've seen a case from start to finish at
I,
this point.
right. And so I like how flexible the level of, the number, numerous times I panic throughout the day has decreased over the years. So there's that.
To hear. That's good.
And I do a lot of our clients, are in-house counsel or paralegals or human resources professionals. And I've gotten to the point where since I've worked with at this firm for several years and I've represented these companies for so many years, I know a lot of them by first name. I know what's going on. So I feel like I'm working more collaboratively with these people that I work cases with.
What are some of the bad things about your job? Be honest. I know everybody's but I
So
think one of the things we really want students to be able to hear from this podcast is just like kind of the realities of what practice is like. So what are some of the things you don't enjoy?
So I think it's important to know, regardless of if you're in litigation or transaction or compliance, for an associate, every day, even if you come up with a to-do list the night before, the week of what you're going to do, what projects you're going to cross off the list, know that even for someone in their fifth to sixth year, most of the day I get to maybe one or two of the things on my to-do list because you have no idea what order a judge is going to issue that day or what opposing counsel is going to call you and tell you or even what your partner or your client is going to tell you. I was in a leadership class a couple years ago and someone said, "Sir, every day for an associate is a dumpster fire." And I thought to myself, yeah, that's pretty accurate.
Well,
If
especially in litigation, right? Because I mean, if you file for a TRO, like it's an emergency type of situation. You want to stop that behavior right away. So that hearing is going to happen like
oh
almost
yeah,
immediately, right?
I
So
had a
fail your whole day.
I had a TRO. I had my partner that I work mainly with call me 2 weeks ago, like on a Thursday night, saying, "Hey, I'm putting you on a case, TRO hearings on Monday." Well, I had 3 briefs I was supposed to write between, that Thursday night and Monday. But guess what? I'm not doing writing those briefs. I now need to prepare for a TRO, and we've got to get a company witness, and it's crazy. So whenever that person, that brave person, raised their hand and said, "Every day is a dumpster fire for an associate," it hit home. But you have to be okay with that. And not everyone can roll with the punches or pivot or be flexible. And so, especially in litigation, where I tell people when they ask what I do, I'm like, my job is everyone being mad at me for a living. Like, what I do for a living is everyone being mad at me,
Yeah,
opposing
nobody goes to
counsel.
court because they're happy about something, right?
Or when like a client calls, it's usually to tell me, "Hey, this allegedly might have happened. Hypothetically, what should we do?" Because think about it, you're a lawyer, but you're also a counselor. Some people say like counselor of law. The term counselor is taken seriously because you really are a counselor for a lot of your clients, but you just have to kind of be flexible and roll with the punches. But tomorrow morning, for instance, I thought I was going to do a bunch of things, sit in a mediation. I've already got an email that an opposing counsel wants to retract some settlement offer and issue some discovery, and so now I've got to call this person and figure out what's going on. Well, that wasn't on my to-do list, I can tell you for sure.
It is
So
now.
it is now, which is fine. But yeah, I think the bad parts are that it's not always fun. A lot of times you're the person that someone calls when they're angry about something, whether or not it's the clerk of the court because your assistant filed something wrong, or it's the client because they're not happy about something, or it's your partner. One other thing I want to mention is as an associate, you've got two clients. You've got your client, your real client, and your supervising partner. Both of them, in a way, are your clients. And so you're always trying to make sure, at least I think if you're doing it right as an associate, that you're putting your best foot forward towards your partner, so that he or she knows that you've got it handled and you're giving them confidence in you. And then your client, you always want to put on your best face for your client as well. And sometimes all that pressure can be too much. And I think that's another negative to being a lawyer and an associate is you're shouldering a lot of stress. And it's important. It's not easy your first year, I don't think, to recognize it, but it's important to take a step back and to work on your mental health throughout the weeks, throughout the weekdays and the weekends, and do things to counteract all the negativity that you absorb from the nature of just being a lawyer. So those are, I think, the negatives.
What are some of the challenges or difficulties that you've faced throughout your career as a lawyer?
So those things that I just mentioned, just kind of adversarial nature, but I think we sign up for it, right?
So you are a minority, right? And you are female. So is there anything that you would attribute in your career, any challenges that you would attribute to being a minority female?
Oh, sure. And I guess I should have thought about that when you first asked the question, but now it baffles me how many times I can have a conversation with an opposing counsel who, might be an older, Caucasian gentleman, and I will say something and he just completely disregards it. And if my boss and I, who is an older white gentleman as well, if he says the same thing, it lands completely differently than when it as a minority, as a female, as a young lawyer, you're battling that every day. And you see, especially when I've got cases outside of Dallas, we've got cases at my firm all over the place. Sometimes it feels like you're stepping through time in some of these courts, kind of in rural areas, either in the South, definitely in the South, or sometimes the Midwest. You're the only woman there. You're the only one of color. And people think you're the client, the court reporter, anyone but the lawyer, because why would you be a lawyer? And so many times I've walked in to courts like that and they've asked, "Where's your lawyer?" or "Is your boss coming?" So many times. That's the reality of being a lawyer still in 2021. And I think you've got to use that as motivation to prove these people wrong. Take their underestimating you to your advantage and wipe the floor with them if you can. Because when I encounter that, that really does fuel my fire and makes me more of a motivated to win. It's always, as a lawyer, you definitely want to win, and winning is a great high. And when you can win against someone who's underestimated you because of your, gender, because of your ethnicity, or whatever demographic, it means that much more.
Have you ever had anything happen with your employers that you would consider an obstacle because you are a minority female?
Not at my current firm at all. It's funny. We were just interviewing some potential associates 2 weeks ago, and one of the associates we were interviewing is also a female minority, and she asked, "Is it challenging working with a bunch of," to use her words, "old white guys?"
Wow, she's brave.
You
Brave.
know, which is, hey, that kind of candor is needed at my firm. And I thought to myself, actually, I haven't felt like I work at a firm with quote old white guys, because even though when you do look at my firm, you do see a bunch of Caucasian older men, my firm does not feel like that. I've never had anyone treat me differently because of being a woman or a minority. It's a great firm. And like I said, if when she told me that, I had to remind myself, oh yeah, I do technically work with a bunch of older white guys, but it's
Good that
equal
you
opportunity.
don't feel it though. That's good.
Yeah, and we ended up hiring her. So I do think, look, traditionally, there were more older, white male lawyers. So it makes sense that there's more older white male lawyers at the top, because we're still catching up. There's still progress to be made.
Yeah.
Uh, just because law schools are pretty much half male and female doesn't mean the progress ends.
Mhm.
So I think maybe in 20 or 30 years, when, the millennials are in charge, things will flip. At least I like to think so.
Hope so. Is there any last parting words that you have as advice for law students?
The best advice I could give is to talk to lawyers before you go to law school and talk to lawyers before you graduate law school. It's so invaluable just talking to people that are in the profession that you think you might want to join. And even within that, even if you do realize you want to be a lawyer and that that is the profession for you, there's so many different fields. I mean, my career could have gone in so many different directions. It was through process of elimination, either through internships or talking to lawyers, that I found what I wanted to do. So many students are focused on good grades, which are important, high LSAT scores and letters of recommendation, all important things. But I didn't really talk to any lawyers before I went to law school, other than just the lawyers that taught that summer pre-law academy. But I never, talked to them after class or, reached out to other lawyers. And I wish I would have. I think I would have gotten to where I wanted to be faster had I done that.
That's awesome advice. Yeah, I mean, I really relate to your story today. I think it's really impactful and helpful for students. Everyone goes into law school with a different background. Some of us, yeah, we struggle on the LSAT. Some of us still are able to get great jobs, even though you struggle on the LSAT. You go to a tier 3 law school, tier 4 law school, but you still ended up in a great job that you enjoy doing and you like the challenge of it, and they compensate you well for it. And that's helpful to hear, I think, for a lot of students. I think for a lot of people, they're concerned, I absolutely have to go to the best law school I can possibly get into. I have to go to a T14 law school. I have to be in the top 10% of my class, or else I'm not going to survive as a lawyer. And that's just not true. So I think it's really important that students get to hear all of these different stories. And I really appreciate you spending time with us today and sharing your perspectives. So thank you so much.
Of course, happy to do it. Thank you for having me.
All right, everyone, that's it for today. Thank you to our guest speaker, and thank you to all of you for listening to another episode of the Law Lives Project. If you're a prospective law student that's interested in speaking with attorneys one-on-one, check out leguplegal.com. LegUp Legal is an online mentoring platform that connects prospective law students with attorney mentors. Sign up for a membership today to learn more about the practice of law and see if it's a good fit for you. If you enjoyed this episode, I would appreciate it if you left a review on iTunes or any other platform that you're listening on. If you have any questions or comments about anything you heard on the podcast, or if you have ideas for guest speakers, please contact me by emailing me and my team at info@leguplegal.com. Thanks again, and don't forget to tune in next week.